Good morning. I'm Dave Emmert, and welcome. Well, I'm your facilitator for today's service, and welcome all of you to our service. I'd like to welcome both those here in the congregation and those on Zoom. So, to our worship here at Sky Island Unitarian Universalist Church. So, if you dialed into the wrong Zoom, you may want to figure out where you're supposed to be. But I'd like to first start by asking everyone to silence or turn off our cell phones. Or you could have left them in the car, I suppose. So, thank you. As a reminder, if you have a particular joy or sorrow or announcement to be read during our service, please fill out the form that is on the back of the table, preferably, well, before now. But if you don't, you can fill it out real quick and get it up here. For those of you on Zoom, please place your thought in chat, and Trish will bring them to us, or Trisha. Is anyone coming from another UU organization? So, all right. And for newcomers, we won't call you out, but we're happy you wish to check out our church. I hope you are welcomed at the door and in our community room. Come in, enjoy the relaxed atmosphere, and see if this church is for you. If you'd like to receive the church newsletter, please contact Deborah Smith or speak with a board member. If you're a board member, can you raise your hand? There we go. It's like half the church here. And we'll get you added to the list. Following our service, you're invited to join us in the community room where we gather for fellowship and where there are many opportunities to have discussions and make friends. So, before our service begins, we have a few announcements. Are there any other announcements back there, perhaps? Yes.
Free thinkers at 1 o'clock.
Three free thinkers at 1 o'clock. So. And also today, since it's our fourth Sunday of the month, we'll do our fourth Sunday, it's tradition for us on our fourth Sunday to take two collections. The first one will be for the general operations of the church, and the second is our monthly second collection, and it will go for our emergency assistance fund for church members and friends, as well as unaffiliated people who may need some help. All right. Our opening words were written by Reverend Erica Hewitt, who is the UUA's Minister of Worship Arts. Let us call each other to this time and place as we seek the ground of our being. When invited, please respond, "I am arriving." Together we arrive. And the words are on the slide. We are here in body, and yet we are still arriving. When we left our homes this morning, we left behind to-do lists, coffee, household tasks, family members, and even pets. All of these await our return. Arriving. Together we arrive. Some of us don't remember the last time we had a quiet moment to ourselves. And yet we have chosen to be here, together, to tend our souls and to one another. In the days since we have last met, some of us have changed, while others are inviting change to take place within them. Some of us have experienced loss. We've lost things, lost opportunities, or even people dear to us. Some of us are fighting battles we can't even speak about. Others feel happy enough that we could have flown here with our own arms. We arrive not knowing quite what to expect, but finding comfort in that which is familiar. Our arriving will not happen all at once. As we each settle in, we will find our way into togetherness and arrive in our own time. I am arriving. Together we arrive. Okay. We are a caring congregation and share our joys and sorrows, trusting that sorrows are easier to bear and joys are magnified when we share them. I will add a stone for each sorrow and joy, and several for those that are keenly in our hearts, but not shared out loud. We have one sorrow from Tricia. She is sorry to say that she knows the woman who was killed Friday night by the dog attack, and she's pretty rattled by it. Yeah. Yes.
This isn't a joy or sorrow, but the chalice hasn't been lit.
Oh! Did I miss that? We did miss that. You know what? Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right. Okay, are there any other? Well, it's a joy that we now have lit our chalice. Do we have any other joys or sorrows to share? Is there anything in the chat? Okay. So, but still, we'll add stones for those sorrows and joys which were not shared, but are still felt by our members of our community and others in the world. Oh.
Hello?
There we go.
This is Becky. Tina's here.
Yeah.
And we're happy to get to see and hear our people. Capital O-U-R people.
Oh, you can hear us too, huh?
Yeah?
We're the voice of Goddess.
Calling in from Pittsburgh. That's all. Bye-bye.
Hi, this is Sandy Kalman, and I'm checking you out this morning. I'm from the Bay Area, San Francisco. Lifelong UU all the way back to Salt Lake City, Utah.
Oh, wow. Welcome. And I think that's a few joys for us there.
I know. Welcome to Sandy.
Thank you.
A reading by William Stafford called Ask Me. Sometime when the river is ice, ask me mistakes I have made. Ask me whether what I have done is my life. Others have come in their slow way into my thoughts, and some have tried to help or to hurt. Ask me what difference their strongest love or hate has made. I will listen to what you say. You and I can turn and look at the silent river and wait. We know the current is there, hidden, and there are comings and goings from miles away. They hold the stillness exactly before us. What the river says, that is what I say. When a former minister, unnamed, suggested that I do a sermon about myself and about my journey towards ministry, I thought, that's easy. I'll just shorten what I wrote to get into Seattle University quite a few years ago. Piece of cake. Right. September 11th turned that cake into mush. The world changed. My whole reference about myself changed. I went from being my normal, confident, assured self who could find all the answers in a book to a self with none of the answers, with nothing but questions, with a lot of confusion, with a restlessness that wouldn't go away. I'd be driving down one of the freeways in Portland that I'd finally somewhat mastered and hear the words anthrax, terrorist, Taliban, or Afghanistan on the news and get a funny feeling in my stomach. So I'd turn off the radio. I knew how important it was to be aware of what was going on in the world. But sometimes it was just too much. Can you hear me okay? Okay, good. Make sure. Up to then, I'd managed to live my whole life in a sort of protective bubble. I'd been free to jump from interest to interest, from job to job, leaving for something else whenever the growing got a little rough or boring. It was a freedom to look at the world through rose-colored glasses and to accept the roses of praise for things done well. But that freedom came with new responsibilities, and it also came with some thorns. The growth of my ministerial calling surprised even me. I had emailed a copy of my rototiller theology, don't ask, sermon to Alex, our part-time minister, for his comments. He wrote back, "I like it. When are you going to seminary?" His question stunned me because I had considered ministry once, a long time before, when I was active in another church. But I never did anything about it because I just couldn't see myself preaching about heaven or Trinity or hell or whatever. I didn't believe in those things the way I would have needed to believe in them. "Are you joking or serious?" I asked him. "I'm serious," he wrote back. "You're one of two people in the church that I can see going into ministry. Please think about it." And the seedbed was tilled. The next day, I mentioned his comments to James, a former seminary student who was now a psychotherapist. "Parish ministers get eaten alive for breakfast," he sweet told me. Not a particularly appetizing thought. So I tried to forget about Alex's comments by joining more church committees, but the seed was planted and began to grow. 2 months later, the worship committee had a full agenda, too full that we forgot to line up service coordinators for the next month. So I told the chairperson I'd be happy to take any open spot. He asked me to do the Why I Do Ministry service, which would include short sermons by 3 different preachers. As the coordinator, I emailed Alex for his order of service. We then began an online conversation about ministry and about his sermon. He planned to use a long stem red rose with lots of thorns as a metaphor for the good and not so good parts of ministry. We talked about that rose many times that week until he left for Friday to come down for his scheduled weekend, which was going to include an all-day board retreat at my house. There's my long stem red rose. I forgot where it was. It's not quite red, but it's yellow. It's pretty. Thank you. I had a program on my computer that randomly changed the background picture at many certain intervals. When I turned on the computer Saturday morning, I saw a long-stemmed rose with lots of thorns. Weird. I didn't think much about it, but the seed kept growing. During the retreat Saturday, we discussed ministry as the umbrella over all other church activities and groups. I facilitated a discussion about ministry from a lay person's point of view, and Alex brought a white rose, which he carefully placed in a green vase on my dining room table. Sunday morning, I searched through the newspaper to find the comics. Does everybody do that? Okay. While pulling out the 2-inch high stack of ads, I glanced at the cover of the parade section. There must be more to life. Why a growing number of Americans in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and on are abandoning professional success and material comforts to become ministers, priests, and rabbis. That seed was now a tiny plant with 2 leaves. The service went well that morning. I watched Alex pace back and forth, holding that rose by its thorny stem, while he spoke about the roses and thorns of being a minister. Jody enthralled me with her powerful sermon, given without notes of any kind. Larry reached my heart when he told of being a priest for over 35 years, but having to leave the church when told he could no longer believe in it. During coffee hour, 2 longtime members of the church told me they thought I could consider being a minister because, quote, "You seem so natural up there." Do I seem natural up here? I guess. End of quote. Can you see the little plant growing? During coffee hour, 2 longtime members of the church told me they thought I could consider becoming a minister because, quote, "You seem so natural up there." You see that little plant growing? Let's leave the garden metaphor for a bit and look at the journey from a different angle. Ask me whether what I have done is my life. I first read that poem by William Stafford in a book by Parker Palmer called Let Your Life Speak. That book was required reading for a class that year, so I began reading it as just another assignment to get out of the way. Stop. But it turned out that this wasn't just another book. It made me look back. After going to college part-time for 16 years, I finally finished my degree in business administration and beginning working as a credit manager for an alternative newspaper in Portland. I participated in women's rights organizations and served as a delegate to NOW's annual conference in Washington, D.C. I paid off my student loans and took some post-grad classes, determined to be a high school business education teacher. We bought a house and raised chickens and rabbits in the backyard, and life looked rosy. Then my first husband, Mike, was fired from several nursing jobs because of alcoholism. Our marriage started falling apart. One of our daughters began spending more time in the principal's office than in classes. Mike died in an automobile accident while driving under the influence. Somehow I managed to help the girls through their grieving, and I think I did okay with that, with holding things together, but it was extremely, extremely hard. I went back to a community college and earned another degree, this one in microcomputers. The college asked me to teach beginning computer science classes, even though I didn't have a master's degree. I remarried, and we had our son. I felt quite proud of those accomplishments. life looked very rosy indeed. Ask me what I have done is my life. Was the life I was living the same as the life that wanted to live in me? I don't know. I don't think about that question. In his book, Palmer wrote, vocation does not mean a goal that I pursue. It means a calling that I hear. Before I can tell my life what I want to do with it, I must listen to my life telling me who I am. I must listen for the truths and the values of my heart and my own identity. Not the standards by which I must live, but the standards by which I cannot help but live if I'm living my own life. Was this my own life? For a long time, I would have said, of course it is. Look at all the work I've done to get where I am. I chose meaningful goals and set out to complete them. Why think more deeply than that? Meanwhile, the little plant was growing bigger and bigger. I started another college job, this one as a coordinator for non-credit computer courses. My responsibilities included planning and scheduling classes and hiring, training, supervising, and evaluating teachers for those classes. The little plant blossomed into a bush when I realized the only part of my job that had any real meaning for me was finding people who had never thought they could teach and helping them develop and grow. That was my ministry. That was my calling. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I applied to the ministry program at Seattle University and began classes that year. I did very well. I completed all the required reading, wrote all the required papers. I participated in class discussions. I had a decent grade point average. That's what counted, right? That summer, the director of degrees informed me I needed to do field work before taking many more classes. So I arranged to do that field book there. One woman was leaving for Minnesota and needed someone to sublet her apartment. My second husband and son needed to stay in Roseburg for work and school. Since I lived through his long work-related absences earlier in our marriage, John told me it was now my turn, and he'd support me in any way that he could. Well, Seattle by myself could work, and the chance to go to school full-time was very inviting. John and David had already proven they could stand each other for 6 weeks during the summer while I attended classes here. What was another 9 months or so? I refused to think about that part. To make things even better, John accepted a promotion to Portland, something we had been hoping would happen before David began high school. We wanted to be sure he could attend the same school for 4 years, and we had already moved him around enough. Plans were coming together just right. The guys needed to be in Portland by September 4th, so they left with a car full of things they'd need there. I stuffed my small car with the necessities for Seattle, and the good old Beacons boys crammed the rest of our belongings into their truck to deliver to a storage unit in Portland. On September 6th, I drove to John's dad's house in Portland, where he and David would be staying. Since his mother had died in January, and his dad was still recovering from open heart surgery, I spent a week doing some heavy cleaning and organizing that he hadn't been able to do. I kept very busy, not allowing myself the chance to think about the next 9 months. When David called me to the TV on September 11th to see a plane crashing into the World Trade Center, my first thought was, how could a pilot accidentally hit a large building like that? We watched the towers fall. We were speechless. But the shock of the immensity of it all hadn't set in yet. John left for school, or David left for school. John went to work. I kept busy. 3 days later, I repacked my car, hugged everyone goodbye, and drove up to Seattle. By that time, the full impact of September 11th had hit me as an ever-present knot in my stomach. I had to be here. I had made arrangements and promises. But I also had to be in Portland with my husband and son, with my husband's father and sister. What in the world was I doing? And why was I doing it? September and early October were very difficult. I used most of the minutes on my phone calling home, trying to reassure myself everyone was doing okay. I spent many hours with email. I attended lots of meetings and tried to get to know as many members of the church as possible. I began classes and went through the motions. I tried to read Paul Tillich for one class, but the words were cloudy and meaningless. I fought and cursed the traffic. I spent lots of time in meditation. I cried countless tears, and the knot in my stomach stayed. I felt like quitting, like giving up and going home. This was costing too much. This would take way too long. This was just too hard. I couldn't do it. The little bush seemed to be dying. Then one week, I attended my first ministers' retreat with about 50 other ministers from our district. I participated in a few conversations and just listened to some other talk between those ministers. They had been expending almost superhuman effort for the past 6 weeks and were grateful for the chance to express their own fears, insecurities, and hopes. Here they could express why they keep on, why it is so important for them to do so, why they need to live in the world in this way, ministering to those who are scared, sick, confused, or searching for meaning, why they continue to provide hope, love, and courage for people. It was then I realized that I no longer had the option of quitting. I had been called to be a minister. I was a minister and had been ever since that little plant began growing. The hard parts, the thorns, were now front and center, and I needed to confront them and not run away. I had to face what my life was telling me I was, what it was telling me I needed to be. So, when you ask me whether what I have done is my life, I could now reply, as Parker Palmer did, that my life is not only about my strengths and virtues, it is also about my liabilities and my limits, my trespasses, and my shadow. I would no longer think of my ministry preparation as just taking required classes from assorted teachers and jumping through hoops. I realized that I was a minister. and I could do no less. Any questions or anything? Comments? Pretty short, but thank you.
Our closing words come from Reverend Susan Manker Seal, who served as a settled minister of Mount Vista UU congregation in Tucson from 1996 to 2010. Much of ministry is a benediction, a speaking well of each other and the world, a speaking well of what we value: honesty, love, forgiveness, trust. A speaking well of our efforts, a speaking well of our dreams. This is how we celebrate life. Through speaking well of it, through the benediction, and becoming, as a word, well spoken.